The first thing it told me was my name, and not the polite, remembered version that lives on my mail or my voicemail, but the one that sits like a bruise beneath my ribs. That was the moment I understood it could speak the parts of me I had hoped to forget. I used to think the house was just old. The floors sigh when the heat comes on, the pipes chatter like distant teeth, and the plaster peels in thin, patient strips. I moved here because it was cheap and because the landlord said the place had character. At night, the apartment smelled of dust and fried garlic from the building below. During the day, light came through the curtains in a tired, yellow band. It was a safe, small life, until the nights started to keep an extra guest. The first incident was ridiculous, almost laughable, if it hadn't been the beginning. I woke one morning with a story in my mouth, a sentence perfectly formed, specific, and not mine. It tasted of iron and lemon. I could remember the cadence, the pauses, as if I had listened to someone whispering into my ear while I slept. It was about a woman who sat by a window and watched birds drown in rain. I stared at the ceiling until the sky outside became gray, and then I laughed to prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind. But that afternoon, on my walk to the store, I passed a house with a woman in the window and a small, wet shape on the sill. The birds were gone. After that, the small things multiplied. Footsteps that paused at my door, though no one stood there. The radio turning on at 3 a.m, the old dial gathering static into the cadence of a voice. I began leaving my notebook open on the bedside table. When I woke, the pages were filled with neat, impossible sentences. Notations, a place, a smell, a memory sewn together in a tone that felt older than the building itself. Sometimes the stories were simple, of a lamp that refused to die, of a basement that hummed like an orchestra tuning. Other times they trudged straight into ache, names uttered that belonged to my childhood, details that matched the hollows of my family photos. It didn't speak all at once. It preferred pauses, the slow bite between words that made me fill in the blanks, and in doing so, made them true. When it told me about the creature under a bed, I checked every mattress in the building and found nothing. When it described the smell of the attic, wet cedar and something older, I climbed the ladder and found, in the dust under a loose board, a small fossil of a tooth, dark and serrated like a jagged coin. Every story left a residue, like coal dust under my nails. I started to measure time by them. The week the monster told me about mirrors, the night it described the sound a throat makes before it learns to laugh. I knew, with the irrational certainty of a recurring nightmare, that the voice wanted me to listen. And once you begin listening to a voice that feeds on the pieces of you, the silence becomes the most dangerous thing of all. I stopped pretending I was imagining it when the voice started using my breath to speak. I'd wake up, my mouth dry and trembling, and hear the sound, not outside me anymore, but inside, shaped by my own lungs. The stories came thicker now, their details heavier, like stones dropped into a well. I'd wake with the smell of damp earth clinging to my sheets, or feel a chill as if a door had been left open all night. And always, on the edge of my sight, a shadow bent wrong, like a person crawling where no one should be. It was no longer just stories. It was instructions. Close the blinds at midnight. Do not look in the hallway mirror. Leave your hand on the floor when the light flickers. Each line carried a promise of something unseen, standing in the dark, waiting to confirm whether I obeyed. I did. At first because it felt like a game, then because I could feel the consequences watching me. My apartment began to smell of wet wood and copper pennies. Sometimes I'd find a print of a hand, too long, too thin, pressed into the dust on my nightstand. I tried to tell myself it was sleep paralysis, an overworked brain making shapes in the dark. But the evidence kept returning. The notebooks filled themselves faster now, the ink thick and dark, as if something pressed harder than my own hand could manage. In the margins were sketches, rows of jagged teeth, a curve of a skull stretched too wide, claws like needles curling toward the page. I hadn't drawn them. Yet when I looked closely, I recognized them. They were memories my mind had been trying to deny. A figure at the end of my childhood bed, its head cocked, its voice like dead leaves scraping over stone. It started to appear while I was awake. First, in reflections, the flash of a pale face behind mine in the microwave door, a grin stretching too far. Then, bolder, a silhouette crouched at the foot of my bed, its long fingers curling around the frame as it whispered something only my bones could understand. Its skin wasn't quite skin. It looked like parchment stretched over something breathing, and its eyes, black wells with no bottom, watched me as though they'd been waiting a very long time for me to finally see. I didn't run. I couldn't. Every time I tried to leave the apartment at night, my body refused, like a puppet string pulled too tight. It told me stories as I sat frozen on the floor, its face inches from mine, its teeth moving but not opening far enough to swallow the sound. It told me about the way a person can become hollow if they let too many stories pass through them. It told me about my family, the parts I'd buried, the names of the dead I never spoke. And it told me about the night I was born and what waited in the corner of the delivery room, unseen. The stories weren't just warnings anymore. They were blueprints. It wanted me to build something, or maybe to become something. And in the pauses between its sentences, I realized with a kind of numb horror that it wasn't just telling me stories, it was teaching me how to tell them back. I thought, stupidly bravely, that if I could name it, I could close it. So I gathered the notebooks, every page of its neat smoking sentences, and carried them to the bathtub. Water is an honest thing. It swallows paper and gives nothing back. For the first time in weeks, the apartment smelled only of bleach and lemon from the cleaner I used to lull myself into feeling practical. I set the pages afloat, watched the ink spread into little black rivers, and for a moment the voice was only the drip of the faucet and the distant hum of the heater. Then the laughter started, soft like rain in a gutter, and the bathtub filled not with water, but with the sound of pages turning. The ink on the top sheet quivered as if something had breathed against it. I dropped the match I had held poised between my fingers. It hissed into steam, and the air went cold enough to sting. The bathtub sighed, and the voice spoke my name from below the surface, low and damp, as if the house itself had swallowed it. I remember the hunger then, and how wrong it felt to call it hunger. It was an absence shaping itself into appetite. The thing wanted not to be named, but to be repeated. It wanted to slip from my ribs into the mouths of others. That was its design, to make storytellers of its listeners. Every obedience, every small instruction, had been a lesson in cadence and timing, in the way a sentence can open a door if spoken with the right pause. I tried to tear the notebooks apart, to scrape the ink from the pages with a spoon until my hands were raw. The scratches only made patterns the voice could read. I burned one page in the kitchen sink and watched the flame tremble into the shape of a grin. I wrapped myself in towels and sheets and pushed my face into the mattress to smother any sound. I did this because there is terror in being an audience to your own undoing. I did this because I thought silence might be a lock. It wasn't a lock, it was a stage. That night, the apartment became a theater. The light in the hallway winked on and off like a metronome. The door to my bedroom creaked, and in the doorway, outlined against the faint building light, the thing waited. Closer now, closer in the way winter gets closer to the bones. I could see the ridge of its teeth through the shadow and the hollow of its eye sockets, like pits that had been dug to bury someone. It did not need to come nearer. It never had to cross the floor to pull me apart. It only needed to set the scene and watch me fill it. "You must tell it," it said, voice thick with the memory of other houses. "You must tell them what I would say." I understood then the cruelty. Stories are not only an offering, they are a bridge. Every ear that hears a thing learns its rhythm. Every rhythm teaches a mouth how to breathe. If I told the story well, it promised, the part that listened would leave a light on somewhere else. I did not want to save myself. I wanted to. I wanted to take the notebooks and burn them properly, to drive a nail through the pages and bury them in a place where roots would choke the words into nothing. But when the thing tipped its head and mimicked the cadence I'd grown to dread, my throat obeyed. My lips parted. The voice that came out of me was soft and wrong, old as mildew, quick as a liar. It rolled the sentences I had read and written 100 times, shaping them into the same patient, small terror the creature taught me. For a long stretch, I was outside my body, watching the syllables spill as if someone else had found my mouth. My hands moved to punctuate pauses I did not choose. I told the story of the woman at the window and the drowned birds, of the laugh that comes before the throat gets used to sound. I told it to the empty room, to the camera I had set on the bookshelf earlier, because in the end the thing cared nothing for who listened, only that someone would. When the story ended, the apartment was quieter than it had any right to be. The figure in the doorway smiled as if satisfied, and the air tasted of pennies and cedar and something farther off, like the inside of a crypt. I heard my own voice on the recording, and for a moment I thought it would be a proof that I had survived. But the voice on the tape had a crack in it, the same slow, deliberate pause I had practiced under pressure of that other voice. It sounded like me, and not me all at once. I left the file where anyone could find it. I stacked the burned pages in a box and slid them under the floorboards where my childhood teeth had once been. I closed the curtains and turned the key in the lock the way people do when they want to pretend to be safe. But the thing does not require doors or keys. It requires only tongues. If you are listening to this, if the cadence seems to settle into your chest like a warm, obedient thing, do not answer. It is already learning to speak as me.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.